So let's start this conversation off by discussing our definition, redefining infidelity, because I think that we've been conditioned by movies, television, music to look at infidelity as another person coming into the relationship and messing things up, or the person stepping out. But I think once we really understand that we live in a society that gives us, inundates us with basically so many avenues for infidelity, and it's not just a person. It can be food, shopping, sports, anything that can pull us out of our relationships, out of our marriages. So let's talk more about how we basically came up with that concept.
Right, like infidelity, so like a lot of words in the English language, which means the dictionary definition doesn't properly describe what's happening with the word. Yeah. So I think a useful thing when you want to really find out what a word means, on a deeper level, is to look at its etymology, look at its origins. And etymologically, infidelity just means unfaithfulness. It means to not have faith or to lack in faith. So I think whenever we're talking about infidelity, as you stated, we can't just reduce it to sexual, infidelity. Physical. Infidelity can be emotional, it can be psychological, it could be withholding intimacy. It's so many ways, and I feel that the culture of America is an infidelity-based culture.
I agree.
And by that I mean the goal for men and women is to trap us in a state of perpetual arousal, which basically means we never kind of evolve beyond our lower self. We never evolve beyond our appetites. So we're just constantly driven by these kind of carnal desires with no desire for enlightenment. I think that kind of refusal to embrace enlightenment as a worthy mission in life is at the root of a lot of infidelity in America. You have a lot of relationships where the relationships aren't sustained on any real intimacy. They're sustained by being kind of artificially maintained by like entertainment and sports, and that's why I know we have a funny phrase. We say that men in America have multiple mistresses. And the mistresses are the NBA, the NFL, ESPN, their
music,
job, the bar,
their friends,
the strip club,
their fraternities.
These are all unofficial mistresses who kind of are competing for space, who are competing for attention within the marriage, and they prevent the type of holistic, balanced marriages that are needed for the long-term survival of African people. So, ultimately, like all our videos, when we talk about this, we're making connections between the personal and the political, the personal and the social.
Which you can't separate. I think a lot of times we want to tell ourselves that we can separate the relationships from the society, but that's what shaped the reason you are the way you are is because of the society you live in. So you can't divorce the type of men you're attracted to from the society you're in. The society is going to tell you what type of man you want, and that's what you're going to seek.
And the society of America is a white male dominant society. And if you know anything about white males and their Seeley, the ideal relationship for white males is a homosexual relationship. I mean, it's a relationship between an adult male and a young boy.
They say this in their own writings and teachings.
This
is known
and
information.
So if we study their history, we find that this is their ideal relationship in African people as people under their dominion, within their captivity. Under captivity, they are going to mimic and imitate the Yoruba culture. So, and that's why we've come to the conclusion that black men are turning into white men. And this is
slowly
shown,
but surely. It's been a gradual effort on the society and Yoruba's part to try to integrate the black man into them. And it looks like they are starting to be successful, because homosexuality is kind of the last stop on the train into their culture.
And it's become a kind of marker of whether or not you're considered progressive. you know, among African people, and it's a fundamentally un-African, anti-African thing. So when you have African people so aggressively pro-homosexual that now they're endorsing, you know, transgender children, you know, it's become it's gotten to a state where we don't even know where our Africanism is anymore. We've lost sight of the shoreline.
Where it begins and where it ends.
You know, we're so deep into the ocean of, you know, Yoruba madness, we can't see the shores.
Right.
You know, and primarily though, I think this kind of Yoruba culture is shown in the fact that black men, not only do they not kind of have the type of frame of mind to respect African women, but they despise the energy of women.
Yes,
and that's
which is also a white male thing, right? Because these are the same men who were burning their women at the stake.
Yes, by the thousands. Yes,
and it was normal practice. Like if you think about the smell and the stench in the air that had to just consume the environment, and they were fine with smelling that because they hated women and they still hate their women. The difference is they are very covert about who they are. And so are the white women. The white women further the white lie that white men like them as well. It's like they both have come to an agreement that we're going to present ourselves as a united front. We're not going to talk about how much we hate white men. We're not going to talk about how much we hate white women publicly. But inside the home, you already know what's up. You already know. Like it's nothing new. But I think for African people, we're looking at them from the outside looking in, looking like white men, they love their women, or they treat their women, or they kill for their women. No, they don't. No, they kill for power. And they use the white woman as an excuse
in that admission to attain
They've
power.
Never valued their women, ever.
Yes.
Ever.
And so we have to really focus on what's the difference between kind of saying African person, an African man doesn't respect women, saying he despises the energy of women. So that means the African man despises complementarity. He despises any opportunity to have that type of balance that's needed to really develop and evolve in a society that incentivizes him to be imbalanced. You know, so, you know, when you have a society that says imbalance and domination are the kind of guiding principles in all our relationships, then they're not gonna have any incentive to practice those values within their relationship,
because it's about power.
Because it's going to undermine their access to power. You know, and access to power means you have to demean and belittle and denigrate women. You know, and that's completely antithetical to any African tradition. Because you think about like the tradition that's called Kindezi. You know, in Africa, where the woman was seen as the steward of the land and she was seen as the engine of the economy. You know what I mean? And like all of the economic processes that happened within the African nation, they were made possible and facilitated because of the agriculture of the woman, because the woman was able to organize and she had the kind of intuitive thought that was needed, you know, in order to generate wealth.
And the men understood this, and they were fine with the women having that role. It was no, they weren't competing for recognition.
They was cooperating.
They were cooperating. It was a complementary relationship.
Yes. So I feel like the devaluing of the energy of women is reflected in our confusion of our priorities.
Yes.
You know, and that's another definition I feel we can have for infidelity. Infidelity is the scattering of priorities. And your priorities can be easily scattered when you live in an environment that is chaotic.
Yes.
When things are hard to locate. You know, when everything is...
When the truth is hard to come by.
Discern. It's your ability of discernment is compromised.
Exactly.
And what happens when you have no ability to discern right from wrong, or what's African from what's anti-African, then your priorities are imbalanced. And now you're looking at the woman not as the kind of source or the complementary half. You're looking at her as an object. You're looking at her as just another accessory or tool that you need in your quest for power. You know, and you know, so we're over invested. I feel a lot of men, we're over invested in these distractions. We're psychologically and emotionally, we're over invested in institutions and ways of living that contribute nothing to our esteem and contribute nothing to our relationships, contribute nothing to our value as husbands or fathers, but contribute a lot to the wealth of the people who are hell-bent on maintaining the status quo, which is black men become boys. You
Yes.
know, like kind of
Yes.
you know, boys with with bank accounts.
Boys with muscles.
Boys with muscles.
And you're supposed to flex them.
Yeah.
Like that's all it's about.
Yeah.
And I think we can also tell too the decline of African people when you start to see the celebrities and how the celebrities are talking about women and how they let their women dress or how their women want to dress, because it's not even about how the men let them. The fact that your woman is with you and she wants to dress a certain way and she wants to wear things that you can see all her body straight through the dress, it's like, well, what type of complimentary relationship is that?
Right.
that she wants to, and you're like, cool, go ahead. And I think it is very descriptive of what you said. These men don't like the energy of women,
and that's really the essence of homosexuality.
Exactly.
It's not the sexual, even though the sexual is what we're accustomed to defining it as. The sexual is just the outer expression of that internal inability to appreciate the essence of the woman, to appreciate the energy of the woman. You know, because you have to ask yourself, if the woman you're with, you're celebrating her in such a way that isn't in any way highlighting her role in the way that traditional Africa highlighted it, meaning is not highlighting her role as a contributor to the wealth of the nation, is not highlighting her role as a teacher, the first and most important teacher of children, is not highlighting her role as a mother, is not highlighting her role as a wife, you know, as a complementary half. If none of those things are present in ways you celebrate the woman, that means you're not really celebrating the woman. You're celebrating the outer appearance, and you're calling it womanhood. Meanwhile, internally, you're homosexual because you have more respect for men, for male forms of power, male forms of domination, than you do the woman who is, you know, the saving grace, the only thing that separates you from the grave. You know, and so that's what we have an issue with right now. We are having difficulty reconciling, and it shouldn't be reconciled. We're having difficulty reconciling our African essence with the Yorugu society. Yes. So it comes out in these very dysfunctional ways. They
always are going to conflict. We're never going to have peace and harmony in that society. Even if you desire to be like them, it doesn't work for us. And this is why we see our relationships are so dysfunctional, and we vocalize how dysfunctional our relationships are because it's not normal to us. Versus them, they have dysfunctional relationships and they don't have to vocalize.
We know it's wrong, we know it's wrong, but we don't have the tools or the vocabulary, the emotional intelligence to really heal it, because all of those things have been kind of obliterated in the genocide that happened against us.
And it's normal for them. White women have never been treated well by white men, so there's no reason for them to go out saying white men aren't treating us well in our relationships. This is normal for us. We know what it means, and our genetic memory tells us that African men and African women once had harmonious relationships. So we have that memory, so we can sense, although we may not, like you said, have the vocabulary or the words to define it, we can sense that something isn't right, and that's why we vocalize about, you know, men aren't this, men aren't that. We're going about it the wrong way, but at least we know something is wrong. They don't sense anything wrong with their relationships, and there isn't anything wrong because they came from the ice. This has always worked for them, but we can't mimic their relationship practices because it's detrimental to not just the relationship but to the family. The children suffer.
It's detrimental to the nation.
The children suffer, and not only because to take it in a bigger context, like you said, the nation, other people looking at your relationships are suffering because you're presenting it one way, all harmonious and lovely and peaches and cream and everything is perfect. Meanwhile, you're in turmoil behind the scenes, and people are mimicking their relationships after your dysfunctional relationship.
And that's maybe
it's a lie. It's just one big lie, and we all have relationship goals based off somebody else's lie. Meanwhile, they're in turmoil. They're being lied to. They're being cheated on. They're being abused. But on Instagram, you can't tell.
Right. And Baruti, he calls that impacted lies. You know, like basically lie upon lie. You know how if you're, you know, you have constipation, they say impacted, like waste, like just so the lies are so impacted that we can't even kind of identify or locate where the truth is. Started. And the danger, I think, and this is one of the byproducts I feel of social media, is social media culture creates these false solutions. So you have a dysfunctional relationship, and people think they can heal them by, as you said, mimicking the kind of aesthetics and the superficial elements of what a good relationship looks like. Right. So you stand in front of a house that you just bought. You celebrate, you know, a child, or you have an extravagant engagement video.
Or extravagant wedding.
You have an extravagant wedding. All these different spectacles, they kind of stand in for the type of substance that we're missing in our relationships. And then people who are suffering, who are, as you said, vocalizing dysfunction but don't know how to have the tools to repair it, they then look at these spectacles as the answer. They say, okay, now I can heal my relationship if I get a better job, if I get more money. And what happens is they get the job, they get the money, they get the house, and the emptiness is still there because they never identified the source, which is that they're outside of their culture.
Or the abuse worsens.
Yes, or the abuse worsens.
So you climb up the ladder of success in the society. Meanwhile, you're in a more abusive relationship than you were before you got those things.
Right. Yeah. It's like the society incentivizes, and it's like a transactional thing. Like the more success, the more abuse. You know. And so, but you have to say, how can I then achieve success without the cost of abuse? That's, you have to step outside of the culture. Right. That is your enemy. Right. You know, you have to begin to diagnose it, not just in terms of these are personal issues or mental issues, but these mental and personal issues can only be created within a certain social context. Right. In the social context, it kind of gives it creates the soil for these dysfunctions to produce themselves. Because you have to ask, whenever you see certain dysfunctions repeat themselves, like on a mass scale in society, then you have to start thinking beyond the level of flaws within the individual. You have to think, what's the flaw within society? Right.
Or like, I just always happen to find bad men, or I just always happen to find bad women. No, the society is manufacturing everybody to be the same. Yeah, and your judgment isn't off. I mean, it can be, because if you're getting your judgment based off the society, but more than likely it's just you're in a melting pot of confused, chaotic people, and you're gonna scoop up, put the spoon in there, and it's gonna be the same chaotic person. Right. In a different body.
And we can even see this in the media now, because, you know, since COVID, a lot of the artificial things that the distractions that people use to supplement the lack of substance in their relationship, all of those distractions have kind of been they've declined because people don't have the same ability to go out and gather and congregate in social settings, so they're spending a lot more time at home. Right. And what you find is that married couples, they don't want to have sex anymore. Because sex requires a certain level of intimacy. You know, and that intimacy has always been absent, but they've been able to sustain this libido because their libido has been maintained artificially by all this outside stuff, all the stuff outside the marriage. But once you take that away from them, and they're in close quarters with their wife, the person who they vowed to stay with for the rest of their life, now they're realizing that this marriage that I thought was meaningful is just a spectacle, and now I have to actually do the kind of spiritual and emotional investment, you know, in terms of building a kind of intimacy within our relationships. But the culture doesn't value that. So now you have a kind of stalemate where people are just literally just, you know, in distress because they don't know what to do. They're unequipped to deal with these types of spiritual challenges in a despiritualized society. And that's one of the worst things that ever happened to the African, is we was despiritualized, you know, in captivity. You know, and just like animals, when animals are put in captivity, they start to manifest characteristics they wouldn't have in their natural habitat. So in the same way, Africans, you put an African in captivity and take their symbolism and take their language and
their God,
and take their God and take their ways
and
of their diet and their ways of valuing each other. You know, with a woman, you know, she goes from, you know, a sacred being, you know, to a side piece, you know, a sacred being to just my girl, or, you know, somebody just my rib. You know, all these ways that we kind of diminish, you know, the value of women. These are reflections of the fact that we've been despiritualized.
Yeah.
And part of that despiritualization is that we don't just despise the woman, we despise ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you take her down, you're taking yourself down.
Right.
Because the man and the woman are supposed to be,
right.
in African understanding, inseparable.
Mm-hmm. And when we despise the woman, we can't help but despise what she produces, which is our children.
Yes, because that's what we came.
And even the women too. Sometimes a lot of times women are having children and they don't like these babies. They don't like them. As soon as they start talking, they like bad. Trying to get them away. When I'm gonna send you off to college? I can't wait till you get old enough to go away. Like we're just so far removed from who we should be and who Yahweh ordained us to be, and we're suffering because of that. Yes. And it was the same thing in the Bible. I mean, if people who believe that the Bible actually happened or believe everything in it. People were suffering because they refused to listen. They refused to be obedient.
Yes.
They were doing what the society told them to do. They didn't want to listen, and they were just going around in circles, suffering.
Right.
And that's what we're doing. We're doing the same thing over and over again instead of saying, wait a minute, who told us to do this, and why are we doing it?
Right. And that really, a light bulb just went off in my head because, again, we defined infidelity, the origin of the word, and it's the lack of faith. So I want to introduce a new term. What we're practicing in regard to our children is a form of parental infidelity. We're being unfaithful to our children. Yeah. Because again, infidelity means lack of faith. It doesn't mean adultery.
Right.
It means lack of faith. That's why in religious traditions, Muslims, they call people who don't practice their faith infidels. They're saying you're not faithful to my system of belief.
Yeah.
So we're saying in the African sense, we're being infidels in our marriages. We're being infidels in the terms of how we parent our children. We're being infidels in terms of how we treat our brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
We're being infidels in relation to our God. We're being infidels in relation to our culture. Like we've become a very unfaithful people because we live in the presence of an evil, unfaithful people. And can't.
We've adapted their ways.
We've kind of bought the illusion that we could roll around in a mud pit and not get mud on us.
Really?
Like we can live amongst the pigs and then with the white shirt
be clean
and
as
then
hell.
Emerge, bleach white.
No,
that doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen.
If you
You're
live
in a society
in the filth, you're gonna get the filth on you.
And these are murderers. These are people. These are people who steal, kill, and destroy.
Yes.
And you can't benefit, no matter what religion you are.
Right.
You cannot benefit from a society that kills, steals, and destroys from God's green earth.
But when we apply what we say to our lives, that's when we start to get to the level of spiritual awareness. And that's also the definition of wisdom, by the way. Wisdom is applied knowledge, meaning you know something and then you apply it to your life. You apply it to your life, and when you apply it, it transforms your condition.
Right.
That's what it means to be a person of wisdom. So we're asking for African people to adopt and inject wisdom into their relationships.
Yes.
Inject wisdom into their parental
truth-seeking
relationships and their marital relationships. And truth-seeking, that should be at the core always in any relationship you have.
Right.
With nature, with God, with your children, with your brothers, your sisters, your wife. It all should be truth-based.
Right.
Now we're going to get to the more narrowly defined form of infidelity, which is sexual, or the infidelity in marital relationships. Okay. And I have an idea. The idea is basically marriage, on average, is only as solid as the commitment of the man. Again, I'm gonna say that again. Yeah. Marriage, on average, is only as solid as the commitment of the man. Man protects the marriage from external threats. The woman establishes the internal standards of behavior, or she sets the tone within the marriage. And basically what I have in mind here is statistically, and again, this isn't opinion, this is just empirical facts. Statistically, men cheat more than women.
Right.
Men tend to violate the vows of their marriage more than women do. That being said, we have to really interrogate why is it that men tend to violate the marriage more than women. And I think it goes to what we said at the beginning, which is an infidelity-based society is designed to keep men in a state of perpetual arousal.
Yes.
And furthermore, men are socialized to think that their worth and their esteem is connected to the amount of bodies they can acquire, to the amount of women they can conquer.
Right.
You know, like land. It's an imperialist type of mentality that is very un-African.
Right.
And this mentality, when men internalize it, it prevents them from opening themselves up and establishing a deep spiritual bond with the women they're with. Meanwhile, the woman, she's tasked with, as I said, of setting the tone of the internal standards of behavior. Because remember, the woman is the first and most important teacher of the children. She establishes the kind of moral framework that people operate within. That doesn't mean the man also doesn't have a role in doing that, but the woman is the initiator. She's the one who says, okay, I'm going to start. And then after I start, I'm depending on the husband to work with me to maintain this internal health.
Right.
So her job is to maintain the internal health. The husband's job is to maintain the perimeter, meaning to protect it from external threats.
Right.
Now what happens is a man who's under the spell of an infidelity-based culture, he isn't going to guard the perimeter correctly.
Yeah, he's not.
He's going to leave the gate wide open. He's going to
invite people in.
He's going to invite people in. He's going to invite porn in. He's going to invite promiscuity in. He's going to invite profanity in. He's going to
abuse.
He's going to invite abuse in. He's going to invite sports in.
Right.
He's going to invite all these things, brotherhood in, fake brotherhood in, Greek brotherhood in. He's going to invite all these things in, failing in his role as the person who's supposed to guard the perimeter. And by doing that, he's going to make it extremely difficult for his wife to maintain order internally, order in the domains of the relationship.
Right.
And when she can't maintain that order within the relationship, she's naturally going to look elsewhere. So it's not always the man and sometimes if the woman can't manage her space, you know, in a harmonious fashion peacefully, she's going to go out and find another man.
Right.
And then likewise, the man who's again under the spell of the infidelity-based culture, he's going to go elsewhere. So what you have is on both fronts, the man, his inability to guard the perimeter has now opened up the nation, opened up the relationship for corruption, and that corruption then leads to the infidelity. Right. It leads to the man stepping out. And you know, we even saw a movie that we felt was like very emblematic of this because and it was called Mother of George. It's a well shot movie. And it's by an African director. And in the movie,
and it's a Nigerian couple that just gets married.
Right, in the movie, it starts out, there's a wedding, and it's a Nigerian couple. I believe they're immigrants. And so it's a traditional Nigerian wedding. And then after the wedding, you know, after the ceremony, the groom, he's sitting at a table with, you know, elders and, you know, peers, basically. And they're at the reception. And during the reception, one of the men at the table looks at the groom and he says, okay, now that you're married, if at any time you want to step out, remember, don't bring it back home. And it was just said so matter-of-factly as if,
and the people at the table kind of laughed.
And the people, there was no accountability. It was very just casual. And the idea that, and that's a normalized thing, I feel, for men under the spell of an infidelity-based culture. The idea isn't that, you know, in getting married, you're making a spiritual commitment. It's just about kind of checking something off on the list. It's an economical kind of very
Christian,
self-interested Christian, religious-based, but not spiritually based
at all. And this was
action.
At the wedding.
And this
they weren't even like, this wasn't even like months down the line. This was the day they said I do.
Right.
And he was like, just in case. Mind you, the women didn't get that conversation. They didn't show. The director didn't show the woman being sat down saying, now, if you decide to step out, this was the male thing. So like we said, it's been kind of this culture, especially amongst people in America, that you're going to cheat. That's just part of the relationship, and your goal is to just manage it as the man. Your goal is not to let it get too out of hand. Don't be making babies. Don't bring it back home. Right. Don't bring it back home. Don't be getting nobody pregnant or nothing like that. But you know, do your thing, but just be responsible. That is a Yorugu white man concept, and it does not work for us. It works fine for them. It does not work for us.